Taking your questions this week is General Dutton, ISAF Deputy Commander. Sir, here is your first question. There has been much debate regarding the need for additional forces in Afghanistan. How much impact will changes in forces make?
Well, I think it's pretty widely known that it takes a lot more military forces to protect a population than it does to attack an area. And so that's why there's a requirement for a lot of forces in a counterinsurgency campaign where the main aim is to protect the people, not to hold ground. And probably the best thing to do is to look at what has happened in areas where we have been able to put in more forces. And there's some good examples of that recently in the south with the arrival of the US Marines in Helmand and indeed the Striker Brigade Combat Team in the Kandahar province, where security in many areas in those two provinces has improved markedly simply as a result of the increase in number of forces, which has allowed us to have a much greater footprint of security. So in many, and I wouldn't in any way suggest this is the only measure or the only means of doing it, but in many areas in this country, indeed in any other country where you're trying to defeat an insurgency, force ratios become really important. You can't do this with an inadequate number of soldiers. You need to be able to put enough soldiers on the ground to give confidence to the population that having cleared an area of the insurgents, you have sufficient force there to hold. And I think most people know our plan is to put coalition forces mixed in with as many Afghan security forces as are available into an area, and then gradually, as the Afghan national security forces become more capable and, more importantly, larger in number, we're then able to pull the coalition forces back. That's some time away, but that is the aspiration.
There are 42 nations involved in the effort in Afghanistan. Can you comment on the importance of the multinational contribution, and will any other nations become involved?
I think the multinational aspect of this is crucially important because I'm probably right in saying that a 42-nation military coalition is unparalleled in history, certainly in modern history. And remember, it's not just the 42 nations forming the military coalition. There are a lot of other nations that are not putting in military forces who are also involved in the business of trying to reconstruct and assist Afghanistan on its way to normality and stability. So it's crucially important. And I always use as an example in these circumstances when I was in Iraq, commanding in southern Iraq in Basra 4 years ago. I had 12 nations under command in what was called Multinational Division Southeast. 18 months later, I had two. I'd gone, but there were only 2 left. Coalitions of the willing build very quickly for a specific circumstance and then collapse very quickly when that circumstance is perceived to be over. The difference here is that this is a particularly steadfast political coalition. And as we've seen, it's grown in my time here by one nation, admittedly, but nevertheless it's growing, not getting smaller. I know there is talk of at least 2 nations who are going to adjust their contributions over the next 2 years, although certainly not fully withdraw. But it is hugely important. Of course, there's a big difference in numbers of troops. By far the largest contributor, even before the recent uplift, is of course the United States, and then followed by, a long way behind, by other nations. When you get down to the smaller nations, some are contributing only in single figures. But that's not the point. The point is that the political contribution and the political message that is sent by that size of coalition is very important. And I think we need to do everything we can to sustain that multinational coalition for that reason.